Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, the Wheel of Jobs decided that we play Sage on a Monday evening, and this set was, unsurprisingly for a healer set, very dungeon heavy. For Duty 1, we started with Hullbreaker Isle Hard. The dungeon as a whole has a lot of small oddities here and there, but notably, the second and final bosses have some standout mechanics. The second boss has a lightning tether, which is resolved by running away from each other, spread markers that can be entirely avoided by standing in the goop, which might seem unintuitive. The boss also makes the floor slippery and places ice cubes that explode while also handing out spread markers, which can easily lead to everyone getting hit. However, it is survivable. The final boss has a mechanic where select players get affected by a poison debuff, which you can heal through, but is removed only by picking up the antidote. When the poison is applied, a bunch of chests are placed in the arena, and a potion is placed into some of them. Walking up to a chest opens it and either removes the poison or the chest explodes for damage. A pretty interesting mechanic that requires you to pay attention right when the mechanic starts. For level 60 dungeons, as a sage, making the most of Soteria and Physis alongside the Ryokoli is probably your best bet to be able to avoid having to cast a lot of healing spells. For Duty 2, we went to Wanderer's Palace, and turns out Valtiel knew me. Hello! This run went perfectly with only a bit of chaos in the big room before the second boss. In fairness, that tends to get a bit strange for a lot of groups. To give the quick rundown of how to do this room, is that the first rusted Nimian device requires a lantern oil from the pack before this big room. Then, the non-rusted Nimian device guarded by skeletons can simply be activated without oil. After that, the 2 ton berries at the exit will drop the 2 remaining lantern oils, one of which is needed for the device they're guarding, and one that is needed for the device in the northeast corner of the room. Take care to not let the big, untargetable ton berries get too many free stabbies on you. For Duty 3, we went to Fell Court of Troia, and this duty also went amazingly well. One thing the tank in the group made me realize, albeit much less relevant with a ranged physical bringing Peloton in the group, is that with the new addition of Jog when sprint ends, while using sprint so soon that it won't cover the pull itself will mean you get hit a bit more while rounding on mobs, it should maximize the speed at which you traverse the duty as a whole. At least, sometimes. By using sprint as soon as your current fight is over, you might even see some Jog value before you finally reach the next pack. This might not be optimal in every group, but is something that could speed up some of your runs. In terms of Sage advice at this level, I tend to rely on a consistent rotation of cooldowns and AoE pulls most of the time. Kerakoli and Haima, or Panhaima, then when they end, Physis alongside Tavrakoli, then back to Kerakoli again if the fight is still ongoing. With warriors, I tend to stretch this out a lot more since, as long as they use Bloodwedding smartly, I only really need to heal them between Bloodweddings, so I will do nothing until Bloodwedding ends, then start with Kerakoli and Haima. And then they can Bloodwedding again. So we continue sort of taking turns healing. This is, of course, not as effective if the warrior is not using Bloodwedding in a predictable way. For Duty 4, we went to Keeper of the Lake. Throughout the duty, our tank was pulling big and confidently, which is good. However, I at least didn't notice them use Dark Mind or Reprisal or Arm's Length at all, which on its own isn't really a problem, but quite a few times in the duty, they didn't seem to bother to dodge attacks from mobs, which made them seem a lot flimsier than they actually were. Looking over my own notes, I initially thought they hadn't used defensive cooldowns much at all, but they were using those. I didn't really say anything, as obviously the duty went great, and in the grand scheme of things, these were minor issues in a duty like this. For Duty 5, we went to Rubicante Normal. In the entire fight, I believe we had 1 death, which was caused by the line AoE later in the fight that turns out to expand into waves. It always catches me off guard as well. Because we had a couple damage buffs, I tried to hold a Flemmer to get a bit of free extra damage here and there. Overall, the duty went very well, but Rubicante did manage to switch back to his first form before the fight actually ended. For Duty 6, we went to Halatali with a very quick group once again. I think the Bard may have been here for the first time, which is perfectly possible given it is an optional dungeon. Meanwhile, the Dragoon tended to do a lot of the, well, someone's gotta do it, kind of tasks, including using the chain winches. For me personally, I spent the duty trying to maximize my damage by spamming doses while slide casting as much as possible. I even set my controls to Legacy at one point to make this slightly easier. Given that the dungeon has been reworked in Dawntrail and it being optional, let's take a quick look at the reworked bosses. Fire Main has been changed from this effectively DPS race while ignoring its adds, to a fight where targets with circle AoEs, has cardinal and intercardinal cone AoEs, and a tank buster. Definitely more interesting than the old version. The Guivre similarly has a circle AoE. The whole "the water is electrified" phase is replaced with a long cast that strikes in the water just once, and the adds are of course gone given that phase is gone too. I think I preferred the old version, although it isn't that much different. For Tangata, he also has a tank buster now. His invulnerability phase has a cast time, and instead of having waves of adds coming in while needing to kill a number of a specific mob that spawns somewhere else, you simply fend off the waves of adds from 2 entrances. At least on the support side, it felt almost perfectly metered out, so that 1 attack from each of us would kill each Damantus, and the Noxious took 2 from each of us. The boss also has expanding circle AoEs like I believe they also added to the final boss in Corruptible Mines. And he will use the Burning Ward exactly twice, and then no more. Did you know Summoner can solo Halatali synced? Anyway, this group went great as well. For Duty 7, we went to The Burn. The duty went pretty well, although in the second third of the duty it seemed like our tank just decided they didn't want to do big pulls for a bit, which was a bit funny. Nothing wrong with it, it just came out of nowhere. What specifically makes the final boss somewhat scary is that pretty much everything it does causes quite heavy punishment. If you get hit by the Starburst AoEs, you get frozen until an ally helps you. If you hit the dragon while it is fog, you get frozen until an ally helps you. When it fires its ice breath, if you stand your ground, you get an actually heavy dot that can be removed with a schooner. But if you sidestep just right, you can avoid the dot and only take the initial damage. The intermission with the dragon is fog is technically a DPS check as well, although unless something goes horribly wrong, this is usually not an issue. For Duty 8, we went to Vanguard, and once again, I can meet out my cooldowns around the Bloodwetting users. Overall, the duty went very well, but it felt like many pulls went rather slow, which caused me to take a look at what the group was doing. For myself, I tend to be a bit forgetful about the Sage AoE dot. Another thing you can do as Sage to gain a bit of damage is that in this level range, Toxicon is a gain on AoE, so if you don't need the Adder Stings for movement, or alternatively know you will generate more, you can use them on AoE for a slight gain. This also applies for Nevma, although do make sure your team is solid before tossing that one. In regards to the DPS, at least one time I saw the monk use 6-sided stars seemingly unnecessarily. That itself is not a problem, but assuming it happened multiple times could add up. For the dancer, they consistently performed the Devilment technical finish rather than technical finish Devilment approach. A tip for dancers is to always use Devilment second. The reason for this is that using them in that order will make sure both buffs fully overlap for maximum effect as they amplify each other. Simultaneously, while you may feel inclined to make sure Devilment covers technical finish given how much damage it does, technical finish takes approximately or at least nearly 3 GZDs to perform, around 7 seconds, and while 1300 potency is impressive, when split over 3 GZDs, it's not that great. That on its own would also not result in an especially slow dungeon run, but it was something that stood out to me. Anyway, we still cleared the duty nicely. For Duty 9, we went to Hold Up! And this run was basically the lesson in why it might actually just be better to go full blast every time to get rid of the initial 4. If you at least do that, then they tend to come back right when they need to for everything to go nicely down together later. What happened in this group was that I stopped attacking, hoping things would work out. Now, we were this close to greatness, but we ended up killing off the 4 so exactly perfectly that the 5th finally died just too late, which led to a rather weird roulette of mobs. Yet, despite taking longer like that, we still did not see the supposed phase of our bigger gargoyle spawning. For duty 10, we went to Dusk Vigil, and the run went decently well. Each of the bosses have some rather unique mechanics, so maybe going over them could be a bit interesting. The first boss, the Mammoth, genuinely will stun someone for up to 15 seconds at a time. And it's not because you did the mechanic wrong or something, that's just how the fight is. How fun! The only thing you can do about it is the route at the end. While looking like a plain old line AoE is actually a stack, so if your party joins you, you might survive if you otherwise would die from it. For the second boss, the notable mechanics are Death Spiral and the adds themselves. Death Spiral means you kinda have to stay near the boss to not risk getting swiped. Regarding the adds though, due to the speed at which the fight goes, if you choose to fight the adds, you'll end up taking way longer on the fight than it needs to take. I believe the Chirurgeons specifically apply buffs to the boss, but the Knights might too. And if they manage to cast their buff, nothing you do will remove it, so the best you can do is ultimately kill the boss first and ignore everything else. For this pack just before the final boss, there's something I would like to quickly note as well. When the wind blows up like this, it actually does damage, but due to the ranged mobs there isn't that much you can do to avoid it, but just keep it in mind. Now for the final boss then, the two main mechanics to worry about is Whirling Jail and Winds of Winter. When Whirling Jail is cast, if you don't have a rock between you and the center tornado, you will get stunned, so make sure to have that. Winds of Winter on the other hand is a raid wipe that does damage to any player that does not have a rock between them and the boss, so keep that in mind too. The damage is increased by the amount of debuff stacks you have, which are applied both by the jail and the winds. Some of the other mechanics can destroy rocks, so do be ready to move just in case. For duty 11, we went to all in a good day's work of silences, and I may just have happened upon the dumbest galaxy brain optimization strategy for this specific duty. If you let yourself be pacified and silenced repeatedly by the packs before the boss, then by the time you fight the actual boss, you could have a minute of immunity to the effects due to diminishing returns, and you can just beat on the boss and ignore everything. Sure, I mean, it probably wastes more time than it saves unless you somehow, without delaying anything, manage to get silenced and pacified right as you finish each pack. There's also the part that some of the final boss enemies can petrify as well, so you still have to dodge those. Anyway, enjoy this incredibly unhelpful tip. And finally for duty 12, we were a 3-minute replacement in Copied Factory. This, of course, means that we get to watch the first boss fight from afar. The one tip I would give about this is to consider using your knockback immunity for this specific bit where you're getting knocked back while swirling circle AoEs are happening all over. It might just be easier to not have to deal with it at all. Aside from this, at one point my co-healer dies here and I use the fact I am safely out of the fight to let the other alliances know to help them. Oh, also, this bit with the lines of lasers seems way easier to read from above like this. Now, overall, the duty went pretty much as expected with no major issues. There was a point where I had to save a bard from a tank bust on the final boss. However, things got quite interesting on the second boss especially. Quite suddenly, both of Alliance C's healers died. As far as I was concerned, I wasn't sure if rezzing them would help much, since then they would be stuck on the wrong platform. In hindsight, I should still have immediately raised them, better alive than dead obviously. In the moment, however, I initially decided to try and heal the other alliance from afar while thinking over my options. This was the run where I learned that if you somehow find yourself on the wrong platform by being raised, the boss will vacuum you over to the platform you're supposed to be on, so that resolves itself. Luckily, we did end up getting them all raised, because later in the fight, we had a bit of an awkward overlap of circle AoEs on our own platform, leading to both me and my co-healer going down at the same time. So then, we needed raises of our own. While this might have looked very frustrating to deal with, it was a very entertaining fight, and certainly became challenging due to all the fires that needed to be put out. Oh yeah, also, DJ Day and I think Megalodon from the other alliances knew me. Hello to them. The big main tip to take from how sideways this fight went is to remember to keep an eye on the other alliances too, and try to help where you can. Sage is definitely the healer I feel I have the easiest time with, which led to a lot of interesting little points where I could optimize or try to save the day. That said, a rather nice mix of duties, a decent amount we don't normally see that much too, although I always hope for at least one extreme here and there to spice things up. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, by the time Yevcration Prognosis 2 is unlocked, the barrier from the spell itself is bigger than the healing provided by consuming the shield with Pepsis. This is probably not too much of a shock, considering that this is also the case about Yevcration Diagnosis shields by the time healing magic mastery is learned at level 85.